because I found Suzanne to be kind of really a key player in connecting government with the average citizen. And she did it as, and she probably continues to do it as with the Chicago Wilderness as executive director. But I was always impressed about the way she went around and recruited so many people. And she did, I mean, it was really, when you have activities going on, it's really the citizens, the residents, that's their responsibility to participate. And oftentimes I found in the past that there is no welcoming, you know, government just does things and then they explain later. And she had a way about bringing you in first and making you feel like a part owner of whatever project was being discussed at the time. So I would, and that really impressed me. And I've found that there's been a few others that do it quite well too, but I don't think, certainly not any better than the way she did that. You know what, we've never done this before, but since I have time, what I'd like to do is just go around the room and have everybody introduce themselves and say why they're here. Let's start out with you, Walter.
Yeah, Walter Skiba. I teach in Arts and Humanities here at the college. I want to learn something.
Okay.
I'm Steve Beck. I grew up in Roseland. Met Paul Petraitis a few years ago. He's a history buff. He grew up in Roseland as well, and he's the Pullman expert. And I've just kind of been intrigued by this whole area. And we drive over roads that say the Cal-Sag River, and you don't realize how sprawling these rivers and lakes are. So I just wanted to learn more about the environment I was born into.
Okay. Good.
Cynthia Ogoric, I'm a local historian, so I eat this stuff up.
And the person working there is Kevin Murphy.
If you want, I can say something. Yeah, I am Kevin Murphy. I videograph a lot of the things that are going on in the region that we can get to and put them on YouTube so that there's a record of these kinds of events going on. I'm from the east side, or southeast Chicago, however you want to define it. And we're here tonight because we normally try to cover Michael's events when we can, but also because Suzanne Malec McKenna is here, and she's the reason we got into all this stuff to begin with, the reason we became involved very heavily in environment. Joanne and I were involved with the Calumet Stewardship Initiative for about 5 years as the first regular staff. Well, Joanne was the chairperson and I was the secretary videographer. And Suzanne was responsible for the formation of all these groups. She was the recruiting officer who came out to southeast Chicago and had a meeting, and we said, we'll sign up. Where do we go? You know. So we definitely want to see her tonight.
Well, the same thing for me. But Suzanne got us started on a lot of environmental projects. She was in charge of the Chicago Department of the Environment and helped to make the entire city green. Prior to that, she was very active in the Calumet. She started something called the Chicago Conservation Corps, which was not Depression era, but recent era opportunity for citizens to get involved and to understand a lot of environmental issues and pitch in and make a difference. So we owe her an enormous debt of gratitude for keeping us out of trouble.
Out of trouble. Okay, I'm Tom Shepard. I live in the historic Pullman community. Are we going this way?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm with the Southeast Environmental Task Force, and I worked with Suzanne for a number of years. I was on the ground when the Calumet Stewardship Initiative was created and housed at our offices in Egwish. And later on, when she helped to get the Millennium Reserve Initiative off the ground. When I was appointed as a steering committee member of the Millennium Reserve Initiative, the steering committee. I was grateful that Suzanne was there because she had more knowledge of the Calumet region than anybody else in that room, so she was a big help in all regards.
I'm Richard Morrisroe. I live and work in East Chicago as a city planner and attorney. And I just, Mike occasionally gets me to come. My wife tells me as long as I'm home by 6:30, I can.
So,
I'm Mary Kuzier. I'm a lifelong East Sider, longtime Ollie member, Mike's wife, and recently retired teacher, and I like being on the other side of the desk. Oh, now he's retired.
Hi, I'm Pat Hansen, and I got involved because I'm an artist, and I got an email from Michael about 2 years ago that said, put art on the map in Calumet. And that was interesting to me because of the fact that I have lived my whole life in the Calumet region. And when I was working at Purdue Cal, one of the teachers who was working with me was from Palm Springs, California, which is quite a different place. And I remember she said to me, you know, this Calumet region is the armpit of the nation. I was like stunned, you know, one of those moments when you don't know what to say, and I didn't. But I never forgot her comment. It resonated with me. And when Michael said, put art on the map in Calumet, I thought, yes, there are some beautiful, wonderful things. Just the art, the scenery, the culture, the people, there's so much. That was such a very nasty, hurtful comment to make. Anyway, that's why I'm here, to learn more.
My name is Harry Aponte. I grew up in Robertsdale. I graduated from Clark. So I moved back here last year, so I'm trying to learn a little bit more about the area I grew up in and maybe along the way help the environment a little bit.
okay, thank you for coming. How did you find out about this?
Oh, red stuff.
Oh, okay. It is the right stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's our local
Yes.
paper.
Okay, very good. And she was here last, a month ago at the meeting.
Oh,
But she said,
this is my first meeting.
yes, okay. So, I want to,
Sorry if I sit there, you
gotta
go somewhere else.
some of my comments as well, because I found Suzanne to be kind of really a key player in connecting government with the average citizen. And she did it as, and she probably continues to do it as with the Chicago Wilderness as executive director. But I was always impressed about the way she went around and recruited so many people. And she did, I mean, it was really, when you have activities going on, it's really the citizens, the residents, that's their responsibility to participate. And oftentimes I found in the past that there is no welcoming, you know, government just does things and then they explain later. And she had a way about bringing you in first and making you feel like a part owner of whatever project was being discussed at the time. So I would, and that really impressed me. And I've found that there's been a few others that do it quite well too, but I don't think, certainly not any better than the way she did that. Joanne?
Michael, there's another gentleman who came.
Okay, yes,
Oh, I'm just trying to hide out.
yes. Well, your wife says you have another half hour, so.
My wife was a little upset because I didn't tell her about this meeting until
Okay.
4:45, but. I'm always finding out last. Yeah, right. My name is Bob Stoddard. I was born in Chicago, but spent most of my life in the state of Indiana. And first in Auburn, and then later, in 63, we moved to Hammond. And other than a 15-year stunt I did in Omaha with the Union Pacific Railroad, I've called Hammond my home. What can I say? Omaha is, they've got fresh air there. But let's face it, fresh air will kill us city boys. So when I went on disability, I moved back here. I'm a member of the Hammond Historical Society, the Lakeshore Model Railroad Club, the Northwest Indiana Railroad Preservation Society, the Erie-Lackawanna Historical Society, and the Chicago Northwestern Historical Society. And I had a bonus, I collect railroad employee timetables as a hobby. I have some timetables that date back to 1893. So I'm kind of hung up on trains, as you can tell.
Do you have, you're the first organization you were with, Lakeshore, are they the ones that set up model trains?
No, Lakeshore Model Railroad Club is a model railroad club, and our layout is in the basement of the Calumet Park Fieldhouse.
Right, that's what I.
At 98th and
G.
6th Avenue G.
Right.
I call it the lakefront, it's the same thing.
Okay.
The Hammond Historical Society, I've been a member there for quite a few years.
Okay.
In fact, I've given 2 talks to the Hammond Historical Society.
Okay.
One on the railroads as they came into the area, and another one, April of last year on the interlocking tower they had at the corner of Holman and Willow Court.
Okay. Good. And you're in Whiting now, which is,
No, actually, this is still Robertsdale.
this is still Robertsdale, that's true. Close.
I never could figure out where the dividing lines were between Hammond and Whiting, to be honest with you.
Neither could they. I've got a question for you, being a railroad buff.
Yes.
What are the railroads that came through this area and historically helped found this area? Like, I know there was the Monon and CWI and...
The original railroad was Michigan Central, which came through down what is now downtown Hammond. And because of the Michigan Central is a lot of the reason that Hammond built up the way that it did. There's always been a controversy as to who reached Chicago first, if it was Lakeshore and Michigan Southern, or if it was the Michigan Central. The Michigan Central, time-wise, they were about 12 hours difference. One showed up on May the 30th, the other one showed up on May the 31st. The Michigan Central showed up on May the 31st, but technically, the Michigan Central was the only one to have a completed railroad between Chicago and Detroit. The Lakeshore and Michigan Southern was missing about 10 miles around the port. So, you know, who really did get there first? What year? That was in 1851.
Wow.
So those were the first 2, and then as time went on, more railroads built through here. And, you know, let's face facts. The state of Indiana joined the Union in 1816. Up until about 1837, there were no settlers in this part of Lake and Porter County. It was mostly swamp and marsh, and a very unpleasant place to be, even on the best of days. And the only reason that any railroad built through Lake County was to get to Chicago.
What do you know about Whiting, that was in the railroad, Pop Whiting and
Well, the
Whiting's-
Lakeshore and Michigan Southern, which later became the New York Central, was the first one that built through Whiting. Then came the Pennsylvania,
Yeah.
and then the B&O, and then the in 1907, when they put the EJB together, that was the last one to come through Whiting. That's one reason that the New York Central, for the most part, does not have any industry in Whiting. All the industry is on the Pennsylvania side.
Yeah.
American Standard, or Standard Oil, I guess it is. Still Standard Oil as far as I'm concerned, I don't care what they call it.
Very good.
And where Whiting got its name was, there was a switch, and they had a train wreck, and the conductor got killed, and his name just happened to be Whiting.
Got killed.
Yeah. So he got killed at Whiting Switch,
Yeah.
and that's how the town got its name.
Okay, I think I had heard a different version of that once, but,
That somehow he ditched his train, I just wondered what that meant. How could some,
yeah, but he was killed in that.
Whiting
He
siding
jumped
it was
off, he
called,
jumped
yeah.
off into the ditch, that's how he ditched his train.
Oh.
Because, see, with the railroad, you've got wooden ties on rock ballast. And it's built on a roadbed which is on top of a subgrade. And you have to keep that clear as much as possible. So they built a ditch along both sides of the track so the water would have some place to run. What happens if the ballast gets fouled, the water can't drain out. Consequently, the ties rot, the track structure goes to hell, you have train wrecks, or you have slow waters. That's one of the things that doomed Penn Central was their track was in such rotten shape that for the most part, Penn Central was a 10-mile-an-hour railroad. You can't get a train over the railroad if you're only going 10 miles an hour. More questions?
No. I do like to keep the discussions going, so we can continue to learn even before the speaker arrives. And the person that's signing in now can, she would identify herself and tell us why she's here. And that's what we've been doing, so.
The name's Mary Skiba, and I'm just here
Okay, with
to
Walter.
hear what you have. You're the speaker, actually.
Michael, usually at the end you'll talk about what's coming next and some of the plans. Maybe this would be a good time to get that in now.
This would be a good time. In fact, our next speaker is Dr. Mark Coleman. And he is the Chicago Region Program Director at the Field Museum. And he too is arriving late tonight, so he should be here. And he called after Suzanne, so I assume Suzanne's going to arrive before he does. But anyway, but he will be here maybe to talk about efforts to establish the Calumet Region Heritage Area across state lines. And before he joined the Field Museum, he was professor of geology at Chicago State University. And I think he got his undergraduate work, I think, at Valparaiso. And then he went to the University of Minnesota, I believe, where he got his doctorate. He has some connections with Minnesota, and I think that's it. And I was trying to remember, I know Dr. Malec got her doctorate, I think, at Northwestern University. And I was trying to remember where she did her undergraduate. Well, I think she attended UIC, and she may also attend the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I'm going to ask her to see if my memory, how good my memory is. But I kind of think that.
We can wait on our credentials.
Pardon?
We can wait on our
Yes,
credentials.
yes, we can wait on that. And I do know that she would have received her doctorate probably within the last 10 years. fact that she probably revisited since my last saw her. Can't remember how long that ago, it's about 5 years. So, does anyone here have an announcement for whatever project they're working on? What's the art exhibit at South Shore? Thursday.
It closed Sunday, and it was the, I think it's 72nd Annual Salon Show. It's hard to get into, so I was real pleased to get into it this year.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Very good. And what's coming up next there?
You know what, it is kind of an interesting, I don't know right off the top of my head, Michael, but I thought it was rather interesting. Oh, not, maybe it may be Ansel and Adams' photography. George
Oh.
O'Keefe's, I think that's what's coming next, if I'm
Wow.
not mistaken. Yeah.
And Kevin, what have you been shooting lately?
Last Friday, we had the first theatrical production in South Chicago in more than 30 years, if maybe forever, in which, you know, it was a fundraiser and people were actually buying tickets to get in and things like that. It was a dinner murder mystery, and we're hoping that that's going to be the beginning of some movement toward more active participation in the arts in the community. We had a full house, sold out, that was delightful. The setting was surprisingly fine. It was in the Power Circle, not far from Roma's Restaurant, right
It
next to
was
the
the
post
old
office.
Union Hall
It was the old Union Hall.
on South Chicago Avenue.
Oh, okay.
And it was it was Chicago, South Chicago built from the ground up.
Yeah.
The script, everything was right from home, and it was a orchestra, everything, and fine production. We had a volunteer staff, 1 or 2 people who would have professional experience in theater, in movies and stuff like that, but mostly just, all of us got in it, you know, it was that kind of thing. And so I was able to record. I won't probably publish the full one because it was more to get an idea of how the script went and things like that, what needed to be done better and things of that sort. So I'm not sure that the group will even want to put that full video up on TV because it's, for one thing, it's a minimum of 1.5 hours long. But we may try to put a condensed version of it up publicly.
Okay.
And I don't think we're going to do the long one because it's 1.5 hours, guys. If you want to find out who done it, you can either fast forward or you'll have to go through 1.5 hours. So that was exciting. And
Chamber.
what else did we cover?
Mentioned it's a chamber, was a chamber event.
Sorry, say it
It
again.
was a chamber event.
Yeah, it was a South Chicago Chamber sponsored event, so, and the SSA as well.
Does the audience decide who did it, or
Was the audience?
does the audience decide who did it, or?
No, it wasn't like Drood, no.
No, it wasn't.
Is there a-
It was built that way to begin with,
I wonder.
and but we had it structured in such a way that the chances were that they wouldn't necessarily. Oh, well, the one woman at our table got it right. We weren't sure about that, so we built it in such a way that we would include the audience, get them involved in it and all that sort of stuff. And if they didn't get it, then we already had a way of revealing how it developed. That's how it played out eventually. But there were some who did, at least one who got it. One member of the audience who did. So we did have that sort of built in, but it wasn't the major feature of it.
So I haven't been in that building for a long time, but so they retained the auditorium?
Yes, that's where it was.
Yeah, it was impressive. It was set in 1929. It's a speakeasy. It was the day of the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, but it was the South Side being invaded by Capone's people after other Capone's people had done a massacre in the morning on the other side. So it
was a bloody mess, a bloody mess.
Sadly, but happily, the Capone representative wound up going out horizontally, not on his own, under his own power.
So
And
now,
that was
you know
the
who it
verdict.
was done to.
And then it was a case of, hey, what happened?
What we found with that event is that since it was speakeasy, and the day before Halloween, people were invited to come in costume if they chose to, and most did.
Oh, yeah.
And what was especially interesting to us is that they found the elements, some found the elements for their costumes in shops on Commercial Avenue.
Okay.
Bernard's Hat Store, Davis Shoe Store, which has what appear to be in the window sort of outdated styles of shoe wear, perfect for the event. There's a
These were
Carolyn's
not old
Boutique.
used ones. They were of that style, but modern
Yeah.
shoes.
Yeah.
Although if you looked in the window, you'd think, man, this guy hasn't updated in years. You know. These were brand new things that they had.
So it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun.
Wow, that's cool.
And what was impressive, you asked about the auditorium, when I looked at the video afterward, even when we walked in, when I looked at the video, I thought, yeah, I could believe this was a classy speakeasy from that time. They really laid it out amazingly well. You know, sets can be, God help us, you know, they can be terrible. The space was good, and they used it well. Yeah, okay. It was nice. They did. We were surprised. We hadn't seen anything of it happening until we got there with the camera, but it was like, yeah, it was fun.
I spent a long time in that auditorium, years and years ago.
Yeah, for different purposes, yeah.
For different purposes. Is the building now owned by a church?
Yes,
Yeah,
it's called the Power Circle. I don't know what denomination that is, but it's the Power Circle.
Okay.
Kevin won't tell you this, but he wrote the script.
I figured.
He was
we probably
arm
had
twisted
something to do
into writing the script by Julia Hunter, who does a lot of volunteer videography and
You know
photography.
Julia, she's
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
worktogetherforpeace.com.
yeah, that's her
Okay.
organization. And an amazing mind for details. Every table was equipped with a Tommy gun. Cutout, it was a little cutout Tommy gun, but that was okay. You could use it in photos and stuff like that. And
This isn't your first attempt at writing.
No, not at all. But this was the first dinner theater play that I put together. It was funny because we walked into a meeting with Julia a year and a half ago, and we were thinking what we would like to do something. This was in South Shore.
Okay.
We're more closer to her residence, and they had a venue there that was fantastic, the Quarry, and so it looked like we were really going to do it. And so she said, "We have to." And by the time we left, I realized I had walked into a recruiting office and been drafted. So she was like, "You're going to do this script." And I thought, okay, and so I did, and it didn't happen on Valentine's Day this year because something economically fell apart or anything. So I thought, okay, well, that's another one to go in the closet, you know. She got together with the South Chicago Chamber, and it clicked. Everybody got with it and was like, yeah, let's do that. And I thought, well, okay, it might happen. And we weren't sure up until 2 weeks before whether it really would happen or not, because it was like 24 people. They needed 100 people for sure to get to ticket sales, and they weren't sure. So then it became totally sold out within the last week. So that was great.
what's funny is that someone called the chamber on Saturday and wanted tickets for the Sunday performance.
Here she is.
And it was over by then. Hi.
Nice of me to show up, isn't it?
Hi.
Hey, you know, we appreciated it because it took us almost this long to set up the cameras and that. So I thought, thank God you're
Perfect.
gonna
Well,
be-
I knew that.
That's-
Stop it, Joanne.
And
Hi.
Hi, sweetheart. Hi.
while we're waiting for you, we
Yeah.
sat around and talked about you. Some of us did.
Oh, good stuff.
That's why we're still smiling.
Oh, good. Well, I was gonna say, well, I didn't know, if we have students here, I was gonna say, well, I'll have to buy everybody beer afterwards. Making you wait. Hello, my dear. Do you want me to,
So, first of all, I want you to sign in.
I'll
So,
sign in.
Do we
Okay.
have a sign-in sheet somewhere?
Oh, I'll do that.
So, and in fact, I think since everybody here now knows who you are and what you've been doing, the introduction would be very short. Dr. Malec McKenna. And I was puzzled about when you got your doctorate.
2012.
All right, from Northwestern. And she's the executive director of Chicago Wilderness, and we all know what Chicago Wilderness is. And then, but when I knew her, she was working for the Department of Environment for the city of Chicago, and sadly, that department no longer exists. So, but we still have Suzanne, and we still have our memories. I still have mine, dating back to 2000, maybe a little bit earlier.
1996.
1996. Wow, when you were introduced to the Calumet region. So, and it was funny today on my way this afternoon driving over here. I was going through the trailer court, and there was Durs Anderson standing there.
Of course.
Well, so anyway, so I pulled my car over and, because I wanted to find out what he was doing. That's what- and I hadn't seen him in quite a bit of time. So, but they were working on a bike trail. And in 1996, you mentioned, in 1996, we were talking, especially Saki was talking about eventually developing a bike trail that would circumvent Wolf Lake. And we just have that little section.
Indiana's done it. Illinois still has to do it.
Yeah. Well, Indiana has a role in making a connection to that.
Right.
But I think they've already talked it out and they probably have the money. We just don't have money yet. But they were out there, so maybe there's a possibility that they do have the money. But anyway, I want to welcome you here.
Thanks.
And I'll be interested to hear what you have to say.
Great.
And I received one call after yours, and that was from Mark Bowman. And he's going to be later than you are. Well, he said he would.
He'll know what I'm saying. He's kind of hanging out with me lately. So, thank you. Very, very sorry. I took the bonehead route, and then somehow I pulled up MapQuest, and it was a different route than I was taking, and I had no idea where I was. So then I just figured it out. But
Well, I would never rely on MapQuest. It sends you the
yeah,
wrong
well,
way.
I've learned that. Well, I don't like Google Maps either. So, this is one of a few places I feel like I haven't been in Indiana as far as meeting locations. But anyway, so thanks for your patience. Really excited to be here. As Mike knows, and as Tom knows, and as Joanne and Kevin know, Calumet Region is my absolute first love. Okay, first love was when I was 16, but my employment, my passion, for so many reasons, and most of all because of this combination of the ecological, the social, the economic, and just the passion from the aspect of the quality of the habitat, and the quality of the people who've believed in the Calumet region through thick and thin. I was actually in a little email thing going on today with Dave Voigtland from Natural History Survey, Jeff Levengood, and Nicole Barker. Nicole Kamens Barker used to work with me at the city for years. And we were remembering the good old days of having black-crowned night herons throw up on us, the babies, when they were, we were doing this study on the impact of the fish that the black-crowned night heron were eating and its impact on its young. Found that there wasn't actually much connection in a negative health aspect, and that's what we've learned more and more, right? That there's this perspective that everything's, especially the water areas, are super dirty throughout the region, and that's not the case. Lake Calumet itself hosted Bass Masters, probably 8 years ago, and there are a lot of high quality aquatic habitats as well as great potential. So in my old gig, I worked for Mayor Daley for 17 years, and I think I'd been there 2 years when I personally discovered the Calumet region, and I discovered it because there was a overflowing big marsh on Stony Island, just north of 122nd. It was flooding the roads, and we had to figure out what to do. And John Rogner had approved a water structure, and it was all covered up in gunk, and we had to push on waste management to pay to clean it up, and it was the beginning of my love and appreciation for the Calumet region. And from that conversation, we started what was called the Big Marsh Working Group, and then it turned into the Calumet Government Working Group, and we had 20 government agencies who worked together over the course of about 15 years, recognizing that all the different issues were interconnected. And as Mike and Tom and Joanne and Kevin know, one of the first things we did was a research summit, and we had ornithologists talking to sediment specialists and toxicologists and air specialists, et cetera, all in one place, and really having an appreciation of one another and the importance of all those things interconnecting. So it's always been an incredibly rich area for research, but also a rich area for implementation of work. And you've got some of your luminaries here in this room who've helped push a lot of that stuff forward. So I'm gonna fast forward it to now. And what I'm doing, I can tell you that so many of the things that we did when I was at the city have been the baseline of how I look at things now. So one of the first things we did as a group with the Calumet Research Summit was the ecological management strategy. And we had a call to action which was preserve, improve, create. We called it the PIC chart. And we looked at all of the ecological parcels and we said, okay, what needs to be preserved, what needs to be improved, everything. What needs to be creative, and created was really about how do you take a slag field and turn it into a prairie. So we had people from the different surveys looking at it, and we knew slag was highly alkaline. Well, there's actually certain kinds of prairies that will live on that. So our whole perspective was, we know we need to preserve as much as we can. We know everything can stand to be improved. And we even need to look at what I call ecological lemonade, take the lemons and make lemonade out of them, because those parcels are still open spaces, they still have value. We need to figure out how to garner as much value out of it as possible. I've stolen that, and for Chicago Wilderness, which is the area which goes from southeast Wisconsin through northeastern Illinois, northwest Indiana, and southwest Michigan. It's 38 counties, touches four states, 500 plus municipalities, 10 plus million people. We're calling it preserve, improve, and expand, which is create, but it's really about recognizing the natural value of all parcels. So we might not say that this railroad right of way, you would all say that because you know that, is an opportunity for nature, but it is. And highway corridors and all those types of things. So expanding our perspective about nature is what we think is really important. And I think all of you would agree that one of our biggest challenges in this field is that we don't have a big enough constituency, right? When we have a great choir. And one of our public engagement strategies is called Beyond the Choir, because we literally have to find a way to demonstrate the value of the work we do such that others will invest. So I talk a lot about compelling investment, and I'm using those kind of econ terms because I want bankers to invest. I want insurance companies to invest. I want all the types of organizations that might seemingly be disconnected from what we do to understand that if they do invest, it's going to help them achieve particular goals. Public health, as an example. Cardiac, respiratory, diabetic issues. Being outdoors, fresh air, walking. Lake County, Illinois is now giving out nature prescriptions. The doctors are allowed to write nature scripts. Lake County Public Health supports that. There's actually insurance connected to it. It provides funding for the Lake County Forest Preserve to give walks. And they were doing it once a month, now they're doing it weekly, and they might do it twice a week. Nature scripts. How cool is that, right? So it's immediately making those connections to the value of nature to our quality of life. So what we're trying to do is demonstrate that these incredible values that our ecological sites have, and the incredible value that Mark Bowman always brings to the table for the field museum as he walks in, and we love him. Now I feel like I'm just with the club here. Where's the beer? You did not bring the beer, Mark?
Not yet.
Okay. Anyway, I think the challenge in Calumet is a challenge in many places, in that we still have a real strong disconnect between these incredible parcels, these incredible opportunities, and a much more diverse set of constituents who need to have a voice for this. Because we know, we are choir, we also know that a majority of our constituency around environmental work is middle, upper income white. And that's not everywhere, but we know that that's a problem in its own right. And we need to take a look at how we can build a broader constituency, both the conservation field, but also the economic, the business, civic leaders, et cetera, that can be part of it. The brilliant aspect of Calumet is that it is by state, is that it has the consistency of history, which makes it challenging, but also pretty darn amazing. 33 million cubic yards of slag in this region. I mean, that's astonishing. And many of us would, want to cry when you hear that. But the reality is it's here and there are values that can come from it. But the question is, where do you start? So in the Calumet region, we all had to start somewhere, right? And we kind of got together and we said, what are the key things in the Calumet region? We said water, we said contamination, and we said access. I think those were kind of the three main things we talked about at Chicago State. And we said, how do we address that? So first was, we looked at an ecological management strategy, and then we did a hydrologic master plan, recognizing that water movement, water bounce, all those kind of things are absolutely imperative for a healthy aquatic habitat. If it's drowned out during a critical time of nesting, like with black-crowned night herons, and you've got flooding because 122nd Street is all backed up, then the black-crowned night herons take off, which they have, and now they're in Lincoln Park Zoo in that area, and I'm very upset with them, but they don't seem to care that I want them back in the Calumet region. But so water is a big issue, and it's a big issue across the region, but it takes different flavors, if you will. So in certain areas of the Chicago Wilderness region, aquifers are a really big deal. And when I first started thinking, well, maybe that's something we need to look at, I thought everybody would just laugh me out of the room. Aquifers, really? Well, the Joliet Aquifer is drying up. What we have is, you can see the history of how water was gathered from the lake. And when it was from the wells, there were what are called cones of depression, where the water levels were dropping dramatically. When they started connecting to the lake, that came up again, but the water tables further out, of course, where they're still using well water, where there's more development, the water tables are dropping. And because of that, we have all kinds of challenges, not only for human health, but for aquatic health as well. So we have to look at a creative way to address the water challenge and make it a water opportunity. And several ways that are important to think about is that thing called climate, and what we'd like to say, that thing called resiliency. We're looking at climate adaptation and how we can make use of the water that's in very large quantities in areas where people don't want it to be. And so how you can look at parcels of land nearby major flooding areas, and how you can, in essence, kind of, this morning we were in a meeting where we talked about making a deal. I thought of Marion Burns, the broker, right? How do you serve as a broker between the water challenges and the water opportunities? And one thing we're looking at is, what about that speculated land that a corporation bought that's not being used? It's sitting there. It could simply serve as, just kind of to be simple, a sponge if the water had access to go there. Everybody wins. The property owner gets a tax break or some kind of value for leasing. Metropolitan Water Reclamation District or any stormwater district saves money because they're not putting in more pipes. They're not pumping as much. And the local municipality saves money, and the residents, all their lives are better because they're not pumping sewage out of their basements. It's a marriage, it's a brokering between an issue and land, and that's where what we're saying is preserve, improve, expand nature. That's an expansion of nature to have additional values, additional functions that can help solve regional problems. So hydrology is an issue across the Calumet region, across the Chicago Wilderness region, and it's connected, of course, to our lake, but our rivers and our many, many streams. You were mentioning DERS Anderson, and DERS is just about to launch a study with the Oberweiler Foundation that looks at all the headwater streams in the entire Chicago Wilderness region. And I don't totally know what that means. I'll bet Mark does. But he said that we know very little even about our primary and secondary streams. We might sometimes know more about the creeks because we have an immediate relationship to them. But we don't know about some of these primary and secondary streams that are being impacted by stormwater, that are being tapped for some reason, all those types of things. So they're mapping all of them across the region, but starting to understand what they are, what value they have, what situations are they challenged by, et cetera. Do you want to say anything about that?
I just saw a map that he had, and so the secondary streams and then the tertiary streams flow into the main stems of the Little Calumet, and Grand Calumet, and he is really interested in the aquatics that are in there, the fish that are surprisingly still present way up at the top of the stream. And so how you protect habitat around that as a value for the entire watershed, because there may be isolated species living in the water there that need better access to the whole main stem of the system. As I understand.
That's excellent, well done. And DERS is actually on our group of advisors for water for Chicago Wilderness. I'm gonna just hand this out so you kind of get a feel for, you know, what we're doing and how it connects to the Calumet region, and how my experience with the Calumet region has strongly informed the way I'm looking at this new gig and how we can apply our lessons and our experiences in an effective way and not recreate the wheel. So, yeah, like Mark hasn't seen it before, but anyway, Mark's been a major player in helping us think about where we're going as an organization. And we were formed in '96, which is so funny because that's when the Big Marsh Working Group was formed.
Over here.
Oh, one more, yes. Thank you, sir. So Chicago Wilderness was formed in '96 specifically with the understanding that we as human beings have an impact on nature, both negatively and positively. So we've caused some of these problems. We also have the ability to solve some of these challenges and really ensure that the quality habitat, the quality biodiversity we have continues to be of quality, but also our opportunity to improve the quality and as such connect to our human population in a more, I don't want to say codified, but a more permanent relationship so that we have a strong constituency for the work we're doing. So our focus has been biodiversity first and foremost, quality, nature, and the connection to quality of life for our residents across the region. And we've done some amazing work. We developed a biodiversity recovery plan that looks at the resources in this entire region. We've developed a climate action plan for nature. We have something called the Green Infrastructure Vision, which really now serves as our base map of the essential lands and waters in the region. And there's been a tremendous amount of research done. There's a lot of work on the ground, groups who've come together to come up with a certification program to do burns for ecological restoration as an example. How do you deal with white-tailed deer? How do you deal with feral cats? We now had a group last year that worked on large carnivores. Bear are coming back. Coyote is here. What are the issues that we're gonna find ourselves dealing with when that good conservation story happens that's in conflict with a human perspective about safety even. So kind of looking at those connections and in this case, which is kind of fun, proactively addressing it before bear are running in our backyard, or not saying it will happen, but instead of it happening in a crisis state, which is when a Chicago policeman killed a cougar in a alley because people didn't know what to do. So we recognize that we need to be proactive about how we address these relationships with our wildlife. So we've built from there to take a look at 6 focus areas that we think we can have an impact on in the Chicago Wilderness region. We have 200 member organizations, and they range from a garden club to the Nature Conservancy to a forest preserve district to the Field Museum. So there's many different groups that are part of Chicago Wilderness, and thinking about how we can be the most impactful together is the challenge because there are so many groups, and seeing where we can kind of align on particular issues. So what you see in this handy dandy little thingy, which we call Chicago Wilderness Defined, and we have a shorter one now, but we haven't printed it, so just ignore the 2 pages on the inside, and it's kind of a lot like this. But we've decided to focus on 6 areas, and this was as a result of a lot of conversations in the past year. Mark was probably at every single one of them, it seems. or a lot of them. And what we thought would be helpful for us as an alliance and for us as a large region is to look at some critical things we could work on together that could demonstrate the value of our work collaboratively and ultimately, hopefully, leverage ideas, leverage resources, leverage work across the region. So oak ecosystems is the first thing. And gosh, I'm sure I didn't bring enough of these, and I'm sorry if that's the case. I might have more in my backpack. But I'll just pass a little, maybe you can share them on the tables for now. I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna give you that, and I'm pretty sure I have a few more. But our oak ecosystem, oh, there's one. I'm sure I've got more. Maybe not. I can hand this out because I know what's in here. So you guys can share on the tables. Oh, that's the wrong one, never mind. So oak ecosystems. We determined that based on work that was already being done in the region, we could build off of some great work and maybe build a little more capacity, get some momentum going, et cetera, around oaks. So I'm just going to pass this out too, and I'm sorry I don't have enough, but I can always provide more. The Morton Arboretum, the U.S. Forest Service, and a range of forest preserve districts came together to take a look at this incredibly important population of oak ecosystems across the region. I'm actually speaking tomorrow at NERPC, tomorrow morning, specifically about oak ecosystems, because we've got Shirley Hines Land Trust and Indiana Dunes and Save the Dunes and Indiana TNC, all those groups together are doing amazing work on oaks. So the first step that was done as part of this effort was to map the oaks on the Illinois portion of Chicago Wilderness. That's what the grant was for. And we found 170,000 acres of oak ecosystems remain in that portion, which I think is pretty exciting. If you don't think that there were 1 million acres in pre-settlement times. But 170,000 acres, still a lot of acres, still a lot of opportunity. And we know that our oaks are really struggling for a variety of reasons, invasive species being a big one, especially buckthorn, honeysuckle, and the inability of the younger trees to continue to grow. So we've got a lot of old trees, a few babies that are struggling, and no baby boomers in the middle. And that's a big challenge for us. So one of the first things we're doing is we're actually starting a mapping effort in Indiana. We received some funding to do that. And the first step is who's got what information. Marlon Bowles, who's now in Alaska, but a scientist at the Morton Arboretum, already has pulled some information together. But we can't come up with a strategy until we know our resources across the entire Chicago Wilderness region. And so what we want to be doing is understanding what the populations look like across this region. I think we're going to find similarities. I think we're going to find there's some invasive species. I think we're going to find that the understory hasn't been cleared enough so that there's a difference of generation of populations. I think we're going to find there's isolated stands, more on the maybe agricultural edge, or great stands that just don't really have any relationship with anyone, and need that kind of relationship developed. So what we're doing with the oak ecosystem strategy is finishing out mapping and really understanding as best we can what we've got from pre-settlement to 1939 to 2010. And then what we're looking at is prioritizing the type of action that needs to take place in the region, and as such, looking at literally geographic priorities based on the owners, if you will, the people who are caring for land in those areas. So to use Indiana as an example, I know Save the Dunes, I read something, Save the Dunes and Shirley Hines just did a big black oak savanna land acquisition. They know about the parcels in the area, they know who owns it, they know what needs to be done. How can we pull together resources for that? So what we need to do, as we understand the whole population of oaks, is look at what are the biggest threats. So again, invasive species is one particular threat. Lack of relationship is another. I'm saying that kind of in a goofy way, but there are stands of oaks in certain places that maybe even the landowners don't even know that they're oaks. They're just that stuff over there that sometimes is messy because it drops acorns, or they just mow under it as best they can, or what have you. Or it's on an agricultural patch, or it's on a railroad corridor. So understanding where those parcels are and looking at a combination of threatened stands of oaks in those kind of isolated areas. the opportunities of adjacent parcels of oaks connected to public spaces. So Morton Arboretum's a great example. Right off the back of their parking lot in the Thornhill Center on the west side of their property is a homeowners association of about 60 acres, and it's all oaks, that connects to their oaks right through the fence. But there's no relationship with that community. Some of them are members, but it's a huge oak ecosystem that if we start managing that connectedly, then you're getting somewhere, and you can count on a healthier population as you go. So a combination of those two things, and then the citizen action. Tree keepers, conservation at home. The Conservation Foundation has a great program that is starting to expand out. People are trained to basically go in people's backyards and help them take a look at their landscape and what can be done to have it provide more natural benefits, etc. There are some really great opportunities to bring those programs, the successful programs, together and see what can be done to distribute them further. But there's a lot of great stewardship programs here. There's a lot of ways we need to connect, but it's a matter of prioritizing the key things that need to be done and then moving forward with it. So that's oaks. Priority species, we're here on Thursday talking about that at NERC. Somehow it just worked out that way. And we're really excited about that. Again, in a focused effort, how do we get people engaged in what we're doing? We feel like the panoply of opportunities around all kinds of things in Chicago Wilderness is overwhelming in its own right. So we have specialists in both plants and animals, of course, with our members, with our universities, partners, and we've determined that we're going to start by picking 8 animal species for the Chicago Wilderness region. 8 animal species. Sounds insane, but those 8 represent all kinds of species assemblages. So if you pick a bee, it's probably going to be a whole conversation about bees and pollinators, but you have a poster bee, if you will, that has particular challenges that we need to do work on. So we decided to do animals first and then do plants. And the challenge of coming up with 8 is that people have really passionate feelings about particular species. As a matter of fact, we started it yesterday, we've already gotten 9 species nominations. Black-crowned night heron's one of them. Devil crayfish is another. I'm gonna learn so much. But it's a scientific process too. If you're gonna, you need to bring a lot of information to the table so that we have a good understanding of why that species should be considered. And the purpose of it is not only to help that species move forward, help provide some capacity and build some momentum around conservation of that species, but also to look at the kind of things we as an alliance could and should be doing together around monitoring, around citizen science, around investing resources, those types of things. Bye, Mr. Shepherd.
I feel so bad that I'm gonna
You shouldn't.
interrupt your talk, but
It's
I've
okay.
gotten so much already
Well,
from you.
it's lovely seeing you as always.
And I know where to find you.
Yes, you do.
Yeah.
Anytime. We have each other's cell phones, so
Thank you.
there you
Thanks.
go.
Okay.
Bye, Tom.
Oh,
Anyway, so we've got the priority species effort out right now. You can go to our website, chicagowilderness.org, and see it, and feel free to, if you have information that you can pull together, and it's due November 19th, and then we're gonna bring together a team of experts, about 35 representatives of the different types of taxa, from arthropods to aquatics to avian populations, et cetera. And we're gonna duke it out and figure out which species can best represent the work that we wanna do in the region, and which ones most realistically can we move forward on. So we're gonna have a range of things we wanna achieve. We wanna achieve geographic distribution. So we want a strong species in Indiana, for instance. My guess is 6 of the species will be things that are in Indiana, but there might be one that's specific to Indiana that we really need to think about. We need to look at, is there information on this species? I mean, if we have nothing, it's a hard row to hoe, right? And that might be better for our next phase, because this is our first 5 years of work on this. We want to make sure that our habitats are covered. Do we have something that's looking at wetlands, woodlands, prairies, and savannas, as an example? Is there monitoring going on, or could just a coordinated monitoring effort move forward? So by the end of December, we will have figured out 8 priority species, animal, critter species, and we'll be developing work plans around each of those. And there will be owners, if you will, of those species based on people who are already doing work, who that's part of their mission. They may already have some resources, but whatever we come up with, our job at Chicago Wilderness is to help bring resources to make that work happen. So we're a little group. Ultimately, we'll have 6 full-time staff. And the idea is for us to be a resource to our members and help build capacity and build momentum around projects. And then that's looking good. Okay, what's the next thing that we want to work on with our members? So that's priority species. Water is really exciting. I've already mentioned a fair amount of that, but we're looking at high quality aquatic ecosystems, those that are struggling, and both the stormwater issues, both overflow, water quality issues, and the opportunity for water collection, if you will, and the economic opportunity that comes with that. And then we're also looking at aquifers and where there are relationships between shallow and deep aquifers to surrounding aquatic ecosystems, and how there might be a marriage there somehow where they can protect one another. There might be some kind of mutual benefit that can be provided if we work on those together, look at those issues together. And then the last 3, the one in the category that I think is really important is landowners. So Chicago Wilderness has been based pretty much primarily on public lands, land that's conserved through easements, etc. And that is awesome, and there's tons of work we need to do there. But to use the oak example, 70% of our oaks are on private property. So we need to think how we can build relationships with private property owners, whether they be residential, corporate, agrarian, whatever they are. How do we go about doing that when we haven't really looked at it in that way before? Well, there's likely some of our members who already have those relationships. So we may say, what do you need from us to provide engagement, to provide resources, what have you? I think it's going to depend on the issue and the location, but we really feel that there's a necessity to have a better relationship with a broader set of landowners across the region. And another example, completely different from that, is the highways. The highways and the tollways, both state and county, and the opportunity with all the work that's done on a linear fashion, all that land that goes along the side of it, there's potential there. Use pollinators, use monarchs, use a range of different examples where there's long linear passages that could potentially have better value for particular species that can be supported. So that one we're kind of delving into as we prioritize the other areas, and then that'll help us think, okay, we need to know more about the land ownership in this particular area. Beyond the choir, I've already mentioned a little bit about. It's a rather provocative term, but we're having fun with it. And I think you all know what we mean, I'm guessing. And the reality is that the conservation constituency across the nation is small, and it needs to be bigger. And it needs to be bigger in a whole range of ways. Geographic, we talk about diversity. When we talk about this, we talk about geographic, cultural, economic, and generational. How are we looking at our population? How are we looking at the forecasts of our population and engaging people on a broad scale? But then how are we also targeting business populations or whoever that can help us build a long-term, broader constituency that, in essence, fights for nature, that really speaks up for the things that we need to do around the conservation front. Because when the going gets rough, conservation gets cut, right? I mean, it just does. Our own Illinois Department of Natural Resources is just bare bones, just hanging on. Some people are in their offices because the landlord's letting them stay there even though their rent hasn't been paid. So we're seeing that, all over the place. We need a bigger constituency, a louder constituency, and an organized constituency so that it isn't the first thing that gets lopped off. And we can do that by showing the value that our natural world has in a more specific way across our region, public health, and a whole range of other ways. And lastly, data and member tools, which sounds really unfun, but it's one of my favorite parts. As you can imagine, with all these organizations, there's a lot of information, And it's all over the place, and there's some really great hubs of information. Field Museum is hosting a green infrastructure map that's on Google, kind of a spatial characteristic, so you don't need ArcView, you don't need the GIS formats in order to use it. They're mapping buckthorn. It's pretty cool. You know, they're showing where the invasive species are across the region. That kind of spatial understanding is gonna allow us to start looking in a geographic way at the intersection between stormwater, oaks, invasives, you know, all those types of things. You can zone in on areas where there's, in essence, a hotspot of work where you could bring the resources together to get some things done. So we are taking a look at a whole range of elements here, but the first thing we need to do is prioritize. Have you heard that word a few times tonight? Prioritize. Which isn't fun, because everybody's, you know, priorities aren't then able to be met, and that's a hard thing. But I think the best thing we can do is show in the long haul the work that we're doing and the kind of regional impact it can have for the long haul. So our data effort is large, but it's starting with what information do we have, what information must we have, what format is it in, how do we keep it up, and how do we make it accessible. So that's, we could right now list probably 30 different variables. You could each give me 10 easily. So that's hard. We're gonna force ourselves to prioritize by using these other focus areas as a way to start organizing information and seeing how that can come together. So we feel like in almost all of these situations that if we do it right with the first chunk that we bite off, the next chunk will get easier, because we'll have some more systems in place. We'll have thought through kind of our analytical frame on particular things. We'll know more about what's happening in the region. We'll build broader constituencies to get the work done, et cetera. So that's what we're about. And I hope that you will see that this is connected to what you're interested in, because Indiana is a very strong part of Chicago Wilderness. And as I said before, much of what I've learned about collaboration, about ecological health, about relationships, I learned right here in the middle of the Calumet region. So I'm happy to take questions if you have them. You can throw tomatoes. I'm all right with that too.
Well, maybe it would be nice just if everybody indulge one more time. Just maybe that might help.
Sure,
as
it'd be
well.
great.
If we could, Walter, start out with you again. We're always picking on you.
Oh, yeah, Walter Skiba, I teach in arts and humanities here, and I learned a great deal.
Great.
I really didn't know much about this topic coming in. Would one of your objectives be to plant more oak trees in places, kind of build
Absolutely.
habitats?
Absolutely.
Habitats.
Absolutely. And just the surrounding vegetation that goes with that ecosystem, but absolutely, that has to happen. So not only do we have to make the landscape healthy so that the small trees can pop up, but we also need to add to the population of oaks, for sure.
Why oaks?
Why oaks?
And
It's
it's
a
so
very good
obvious,
question.
but-
Well, for a whole bunch of reasons. One is that it supports more species than any of the genus of trees that we have in this region, up to 600 species rely on oaks. It's pretty fabulous in its own right, right? Other things, who doesn't like oaks? Anybody, I dare you. Anybody, right? People have a connection to oaks. They have a stature. We can build pride around oaks. People understand that they're strong and sturdy.
Very solid wood.
Right.
Once you build something out of oak, it will last almost forever.
Exactly. So there's a whole range of reasons to choose oaks, both from the social and communication perspective. But first and foremost, we're doing our work based on kind of good science and good data. And we know we have oak ecosystems across our entire region, and that there's a great unifying potential on working on those together.
Are they pretty disease resistant?
Well, it depends. I mean,
Any
there's a
concerns
couple of
there?
things. Oak wilt is something that's been occurring. Gypsy moth, a range of other types of annoying things, and in addition just to the vegetative invasive species. So there's not really one species in our region that's immune to everything. but you keep the trees healthier, they're much less likely to fall down, to die as a result of that type of onslaught.
Well, what would be like the difference between, say, white oak and golden oak as far as the tree itself goes? I mean, an oak tree is an oak tree, you know, but.
Well,
Then
come
there's-
on.
Then there's, yeah, I said there's white
Do
oak.
you believe that? Do you call every evergreen a pine tree? Some
Yes,
people
I do.
Well, that's fine. It's a common thing, let me tell you. There is a really big difference in a range of different, there's the red oak family and there's the white oak family. So there are trees with the pointy lobes and there's the trees with the rounded lobes. And they have really unique characteristics. They also grow in different situations. So, I'm not gonna plant a pin oak in the middle of downtown, and people try to do it all the time. It drives me bonkers, because it'll won't be able to handle the alkalinic soil, and it'll get, chlorotic and yellow and ugly, and it'll drop. So we need to know the types of oaks, and there really is a big difference, because there are certain species that rely on a certain kind of oak, like a bur oak or a white oak, and they won't necessarily be prone to what I was mentioning before, what Chris Krause and Nicole are doing around a black oak savanna. It's a different assemblage of species altogether.
Well, what is most common in this area would be the black oak or the red oak or the white oak?
Black, red, and scarlet are kind of in your sandy ecosystems, and you'll see the whites and swamp whites and others in a more kind of loamy soil condition.
I'm gonna bring up one more question, then I'll
Lay
be
it on me.
quiet.
Okay.
Years ago, Illinois is a land of the prairie, and on a regular basis, the prairies need to be burned to rejuvenate the ecosystem. Isn't that kind of true with
Oak savannas?
well, life in general? I mean, it needs to be replenished somehow, and
Yep. Yeah.
If you have an oak tree in a prairie and the prairie burns, is the oak tree going to
Make it? Yep, it will. And so when you think about oaks too, you don't typically see really dense oak woodlands. You oftentimes see more of what's
one
considered.
massive tree?
Well, what you see is more of a savanna. So a savanna is the transition between a woodland and a prairie. So our oak ecosystems will have grouping of oaks, but they will also have a little bit more open space. So almost in almost every setting, fire can be a positive thing if it's managed properly. You can burn a wetland, prairie, savanna, woodland. You can burn a river edge. It's one way of getting invasives out, allowing nourishment into the soil, and allowing sun and air to get to that soil layer. So it is something that is being done and needs to be done much more. But as you can imagine, one of the biggest things
Is it done on a routine basis?
It depends on
the
where you are.
In the state of Illinois?
Well, in some parcels. I mean, it needs to be done on a routine basis across all of our natural areas. That would probably be the most basically economically efficient way as well to consistently improve the landscapes. But there's this little problem, which is fear of fire. And the policies necessary to really do a good job. When somebody doesn't do it right, it really sets back the ecological burning effort. It really does, because people are really fearful about it.
I promise I'll be quiet.
That's okay. Thanks for your questions. Anything?
I'm a historian and I'm a gardener, and if you want to come and use my backyard, you're welcome to. And it started out being on an oak savanna, and over the years everything is gone, and now there's such a thing as people being afraid of trees.
Oh yeah, it's been around a long time. Yeah. We did an early survey in the early 90s at some nature centers we worked at, and the number one thing when we went out to classrooms before we brought them to nature, the number one things they were afraid of seeing were bears. And the second was Freddy from Nightmare on Elm Street, which I've never watched the movie, but apparently he jumps out from behind trees. So this perspective is prevalent, and the fear of trees also is what led to the Chicago Park District, as an example, being leveled to just being turf and trees, because in the 50s and 60s, the commissioners and their typically their wives, the commissioners were all men, were very concerned about safety. And to address it just across the realm, all the shrubs were cut down. So that's a very real issue, whether it's black bears or it's safety arrays or fire. It's an issue that we need to take a look at how we make nature not only appear, but accessibly feel more safe. You know, it is a safety issue in a lot of regards. Do you have any? I'm sorry. Anything?
Do I have questions?
Questions?
Actually, I worked in the paper industry since like 1970 something.
Okay.
So I dealt with like International Paper, Westvaco, Plainwell, all these paper mills which
Yeah.
have since merged, and a lot of people are against paper and all that type of thing.
Yep.
But they basically, those companies forest the trees, they
Mhm.
plant more trees than they harvest, et cetera, et cetera.
Absolutely. The forestry trade is a very healthy trade when it's
Yes.
done properly, just like burning is a healthy thing when it's done properly, but,
It's a misconception
It's a
that
total
paper's a bad
misconception.
thing.
right. Unfortunately, I'm a believer in paper because I think people need to see something and feel it and
Touch it.
understand it, in order to, but I'm in agreement.
Instead of touching this all day.
Yeah, that's kind of problematic. Good
I'm
sir.
in East Chicago and work with Roxanna Marsh and thanks to people like Paul Lavis and
Yeah.
Carl Woodruff from the Department of Natural Resources. The city has learned a lot and has begun to cooperate all along the Calumet River as it's being restored.
That's amazing. That's great. I've heard a lot about Roxanna Marsh and the cool stuff that's going on, so thank you for that work. That's great.
Fine.
Mr.
I
Levis will be with
also
us.
have to be out the door
Okay.
The appointed hour, yes.
Thanks for
he
coming.
he knew I had.
No worries at all.
Okay.
Thanks, Richard. See you around.
What about the peanut gallery back there who's videotaping and,
This is a weird process, but when I'm doing this, I don't know what's going on until I review the video
I get
later.
it. I
I'll
watch
have
your
questions when I
videos.
get it on the computer.
Got it. You just let me know.
I've got a general question. I was out the other day giving someone a bike tour of the watershed. And so I wanted to show them Indian Creek. And I got to the portion of it, which I've always liked. And I just saw it being choked out with phragmites. That's not the first, because you could just go over to high lake wetlands and that's all filled in with phragmites.
Yeah.
So, but on a 38 county approach to fighting off phragmites and registering the cost of phragmites. So, when you talk about water, and I'm just wondering, is there anything, how much does it cost really from that? And then what's going to happen?
With Phragmites? Well, it's seemingly as prevalent as slag is. But the positive, even though it's an invasive species that chokes things out, it's also a great phytoremediator. It sucks up, as Lynn Westfall from the Forest Service, I think you're gonna hear from Cherie LeBlanc Fisher, her colleague and ours. It sucks up the crud really well. Phragmites is one of the top species that's used across the US to clean up contaminants. So it has value, but like any species, if you have too much of it, it's a problem. There are actually some new technologies that are being used to control Phragmites. One of our corporate council members does, it sounds weird, but it's a spray technology that is inactive when it hits water, but it's a systemic herbicide that Phragmites succumbs to. And so there's always been a lot of research being done around invasive species such as Phragmites. It will always have some, but I don't think we should let that completely overwhelm us. I think we've seen the benefits of doing restoration, and it's just about that consistency of keeping up with those areas. When the Phragmites first comes back, that's when you gotta get it. So just like anything that we do, if we're gonna do it We wanna do it measurably, we wanna be able to monitor it, we wanna know that our investment's really being realized for the long haul. So, Phragmites is probably number one in the Calumet region as far as invasive species. Purple loosestrife being another, but with the Gallericella beetle, in a lot of places, it's really gotten under control, which is pretty exciting.
Frank's trip, Mark's trip, was it last weekend, something like that. But we were looking at an area where Paul Labus had gotten rid of all the Phragmites, and they did the spray from boats, I think. And I think I've seen pictures of it. So, and it looked beautiful. I mean, and the maintenance of it will come up because not too far away you saw fields of Phragmites approaching. But that's good. I feel a little bit better about that. And was that the reason why I was introduced in the first place?
For phytoremediation, likely it was introduced for an ornamental characteristic, just like buckthorn was.
On the
It
East
stays
Coast.
it stays green longer.
Yeah.
So most of our introductions came for a meaningful reason that wasn't taking into account the ecological negativity. Do you have a question or any thoughts?
When Mike and I moved into our house about 7, 8 years ago, we decided we needed a tree in front. And so we asked the city of Chicago for a list of trees that they would be willing to plant. And so we selected a Skymaster oak. And I noticed this summer that there's a beautiful flock of orange skipper butterflies in it.
Wow.
Wow.
I never saw that before.
That's really cool. Yeah, those oaks are amazing. Well, I'm glad you got a good tree. And I'm sure you've been loving it, so that's helpful, yes.
And that's a hybrid between English.
It's got little leaves with nice round lobes. Very
Yeah.
pretty.
Do you think it's English and white? Or swamp white in English, I think it is. I don't know.
It could be. I
Don't take
thought it was.
the tree keepers, figure it out.
What's the common oak to?
Well, there's pin oak. The white oak is pretty common, but not in an urban condition.
Yeah.
Swamp white oaks are seeing big resurgence because we found that it's extremely tolerant of urban conditions as well. But yes, I don't know much about that oak, but I hear it's great.
And I knew it one time, but I
Yeah.
forgot what it was.
Understandable. Milady, do you have any questions or
Oh, no, I
thoughts?
was just gonna make a comment. I was driving through Calumet City today, and there's a large forested area around Sand Ridge Nature Center down Michigan City Road, and those are all oaks.
Yep,
Yeah, it's amazing,
yeah.
really.
Yeah, it's
pretty
Cook County
dense,
Forest Preserve.
pretty
That's-
dense in there.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
that's their primary species
Okay.
import across the entire Cook County Forest Preserve. I think McHenry County is the same way, Lake County is the same way. So even though you'll look at any of these counties and see that 15% remain or 17% remain, because oaks are so darn tough, they take a lot of abuse and they keep going. And in the face of climate, we know we'll lose certain species that won't be able to continue to live here, but many will adapt. And we're lucky about that, but we still need to do what we can to make them as happy as possible. Good sir.
My name is Harry. I grew up here in Robertsdale. I was here before they built the golf course when it was just a bar stone, just a bunch of slag out there. But I was wondering about George Lake here. It's split in two. They had the road there. At one time I heard they were talking about connecting the two lakes. Does that sound familiar?
I'm the wrong person to ask. I'd look to Mark or Mike or.
No, I don't think so. I haven't heard anything. And it's no longer a road, it's now a bike path.
Yeah.
Now
It used to
reduced
be
to a
road,
bike path.
Yeah, I think right before they were built the golf course, they were talking about connecting the two lakes, but I never saw anything come of it.
But
Well,
I don't,
it's always been my understanding that those two lakes are connected underground by a aquifer or whatever, an artesian well or some such thing.
Culvert, you think?
Where I said they're connected underground. At one time, Lake George used to go down almost to Goslin Street in Hammond, and Wolf Lake went down farther than Goslin Street.
What about Hyde Lake? That's somewhere in that vicinity too, wasn't it?
no,
Hyde Lake is
Hyde Lake
between
between
Poe
Wolf-
and Torrance.
So there are like 5 natural lakes. So from west to east, it was Calumet, Hyde, George, Wolf,
Wolf.
George, and Berry,
Gary.
which is underneath the refinery.
Yeah.
There.
The-
Berry?
Berry,
Berry Lake.
Berry.
Huh.
Yeah. If you go
Yeah.
by the refinery, you'll see, Berry Lake.
And Barry used
Refinery.
to run a, maybe a small hotel at the mouth of the Calumet River.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was a guy by the name, that Barry, I think it was named after him. But I think it also at one time was called Deer Lake but Berry Lake is,
Yeah.
and in fact, we're working on it, there's an area on the west shoreline of George Lake that Indiana DNR came in and clear cut about a month ago. It was right at the environmental, late September. And without warning, so no one knew that they were going to do this. And so we want to get a public meeting together so they can explain what they're doing and why. And
Who did the work?
Indiana DNR contracted it out. And so we're going to find out. But that would have never happened on the Illinois side of the Calumet region because people like you would have told us about it before it happened.
Oh, I can only hope so.
No
Guarantees, no guarantees, but yeah.
Yeah, that, I know, and that's always the thing that I end up, because some people just do not like, some government people do not like dealing with the public. And so things like this will happen, and then, but you have to have people around to remind them that, they should talk to us a little bit before they do something.
Well, I mean, it seems to me, from what I've experienced over these years, is the Calumet region, everybody's made an effort to build relationships across industrial, residential,
Yeah.
government. I mean, there's really been a very strong effort, and I think one that continues.
I
That
did- for the most
relationships are
part.
respected, and I think that's what carries the day oftentimes on the work we're all doing, and helps us look out for things that shouldn't be happening or support things that should.
But, I mean, we'll find out, and it will turn out all right.
We can hope.
I
With
talked to
Indiana
Paul
DNR
Labus
doing-
at the trip, and he gave me a kind of a background on what was happening, because he would have objected to it too. And I don't think it's as bad as I initially thought. But hopefully we'll get that worked out. But anyway, I appreciate you very much stopping by.
I'm happy to be here.
And,
Thank you for having me.
And I want to introduce Mark Bowman as well. Dr. Bowman will be here next month. And
Big shoes
so
to
hopefully
fill.
some of us will return for that. And
I will. I'll be here.
and Mark will be here. But anyway, I appreciate everybody coming out this evening, and I appreciate Suzanne stopping by and bringing us up to date.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Mike.
Mike. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, my one peanut gallery comment was going to be that it's amazing what happens when you have, what can happen when you can have, for transformation, when you get a public sector employee, but also the whole unit of government sort of getting behind something like the city of Chicago did about 20 years ago. And I mean, it really has had a lot to do with helping to build and doing it in a very relational way, which was, one reason we're all still here talking about restoration and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So,
And that, exactly. So now I'm looking for that type of relationship in everybody.
Yeah.
And you don't always get it, but you do appreciate it when it's there.
Suzanne.
Yes, ma'am.
Look what I
Oh my
found.
God.
Oh.
Take 5 for the environment.
I still have copies.
Wow, when did
Oh,
we
wow.
do that? Remember that?
It's
Light bulb.
precious.
Light bulbs?
Teeth brushing?
Oh my God, yeah.
Was it teeth brushing?
I think teeth brushing, right? Wasn't that one of them?
What are the 5? What are the 5?
Yeah, something about
I
that.
should know.
Okay. Well, it has everything, energy, water, air, land, waste, and look at how small,
I know.
you know?
I'm
As a
quite
matter
proud
of
of that
fact,
little.
I was sure I put it into this purse, and I'm sitting here thinking I'm going to show it to someone.
I wish I still
What?
had.
I couldn't find it.
Yeah.
It was
We
tucked
made some
in.
fun stuff, you know, I was actually going through many boxes that I hadn't quite unpacked from when I got the hook from the city, and I found all this Calumet Initiative stuff, buttons and Nature Chicago stuff. Do you remember that stuff?
Wow.
That was early on when we had the brochures that I somehow laminated them ourselves, the trifolds. Nicole helped me with that, and then when we started the Calumet Stewardship Initiative and that logo, and all, I mean, so it's really kind of fun to look at that stuff, and I'm glad that it didn't all get ruined by my leaving it in the garage for too long. So one of these days we'll pull it all out and have a party.
Those are material artifacts.
They are,
That should go
indeed.
into a museum someplace.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is that like the Field Museum?
No, Art, you know, I have only one copy, and in fact, I loaned it to Pat of the, you gave it back to me, yes, you did. Of the brochure that we did.
For the heritage area?
Heritage area.
Yeah. I was sitting here thinking of the meeting at UIC in about '99 or so, and it was Roy Robinson from National Park Service talking about the heritage area. You, Mike, talking about the Wolf Lake Initiative. Suzanne talking about Calumet Stewardship Initiative, or the Calumet Initiative in general. And then it might have been Bill Peterman talking about the Lake Calumet Ecosystem Partnership.
Yep.
And each of which has, you know,
Morphed and
continues to,
continued. Yep.
you know,
Yeah.
echo
God,
today.
yeah.
It was you guys.
Well, yeah, and I can remember that brochure. That was, we had a committee working, and Marion and I were co-chairs. And I can't remember where we were.
It was tan with dark brown ink, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, and you gave some of it to somebody at Chicago, at our department, and I handed it off to a student to make a map, and he completely flaked out and went somewhere else with all the
So you
shape
drew it
files.
yourself, didn't you?
I didn't. You got it done.
Who?
Not me.
One of you guys
Somebody.
did.
Okay, I
Marion
have a
did.
quick question to kind of for the larger picture, the Calumet Heritage Corridor. Can you not see that as something that will really support environmental
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
participation?
And as,
all in one place?
so, and one of the things that Mike and Pat referred to is the Paul Avis's work on the Grand Cal and many other partners, and the sort of tremendous significance of that. If you can imagine
it's-
the most polluted stream on the entire Great Lakes Basin now, almost now, still has a couple miles to go, completely restored, cleaned, detoxified, and with 70 acres of open space. I mean, that's nationally significant stuff, and that's where the transformative piece of the city and Wolf Lake Initiative, Calumet Stewardship Initiatives, all those things, that's the vibrancy of the heritage area. I think that's what we're trying to capture.
I think you were talking earlier too about some of the things that have been accomplished like that. I think of the Eggers Grove thing where we have early documentation of a pristine area that was taken over by garlic mustard. Just totally, and now you really have to hunt to find any garlic mustard because SEPA, Calumet Ecological Park Association, has been attacking it for years. John Pastor. And John would get out there with a group of 5 or 6 people once a week and keep working at it, and it's now, baby, it's back.
Yeah.
Garlic mustard is gone, native species are back.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And in a big way, and it's like, it's doable. And sometimes you do it on a very small scale, it's not like, you know, the invasion of Normandy or something like that, but it's a squad action somewhere in a ditch someplace. It gets done.
Can you imagine without John Pastrick, what wouldn't have been done? I mean,
Huge.
huge.
Yeah.
It's huge, but I could tell about reverting back to the Calumet Grand Cal. I took a canoe trip in 1994 down, and that was sponsored by Grand Cal Task Force. And it involved the president of Calumet College was on that ride. And I think maybe Paul Davis. I was talking to Paul the other day, and I was trying to talk to him about this, because I can't remember, but that was the most impressive and deep impressive canoe trip I ever had, because all you saw was snapping turtles, and we saw one dead carp, huge, but it was dead. But I don't think there was much more in that river. And as you approached, I can't remember the plant that's out there, but as you approached it, there was an oil sheen
Oh, geez.
from bank to bank. You know, and then Roland Villarreal just have a great story with this, and we can never remember exactly how it went. But a couple of years ago, I got a phone call, and I picked up the receiver. Maybe this is about 6 years ago. And there was a voice says, "The frogs are back." And in fact, he spoke, and I think we talked about this the other night. And so I was sitting, it took me an hour to try to figure out who that was. He left no name, and what did he talk about frogs being back? And then I finally realized who it was. So I called up Roman, and I said, "What do you mean the frogs are back?" And because his workshop is right on the Grand Cal at 150th and Calumet Avenue. So he was working right there, and I can remember the time he had some snapping turtles, a nest of them, outside his place. And but he said the frogs are back. So and they just cleaned up there about a year previous to that.
Mm-hmm. It's
But
pretty cool.
I always remember that story, and anyway,
And my son works on, in 138th and Indiana Avenue in Riverdale.
Mhm.
And he works, the place where he works is actually it's a terminal. They store different things there. And they receive shipments by barge and rail and truck because of the proximity to the water. They can do that. And he's a nature lover too. And he said, "Mom, there are bald eagles
Yep.
here."
There.
Right there.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking about them as a potential priority species, even though they're not, you know,
They're certainly charismatic.
they are charismatic.
Yep.
You could put them on money.
You could, isn't
You
it?
could- I just thought of it.
No, it's interesting because
Yeah.
the scientists, you know, there's a lot of, we sent out the survey as a test in September to see what people thought of how we were asking the questions, and one of the top things we heard over and over again is just because it's not charismatic doesn't mean we shouldn't choose it. So there's a lot of concern that we're just gonna pick
Right.
all these super cool things that everybody loves, and I think what we're gonna do is, I think we'll end up having a really interesting spread of species, some charismatic, some people go, "What's that?" And that's what we want, right? Because some are gonna be, the social aspect, the communications aspect is a really important part to garner people's engagement, and the scientific, you know, all those different things bring a different strength to doing something like this.
They also have water moccasins where he is, and he didn't know that, but one of the barge operators. And now that is a species of snake from southern climes, right? And he didn't know that, he wasn't, Michael, he wasn't aware of that.
Climate
And
change.
And one of the barge operators who was coming from the south said to him, "Do you know you have a whole nest of water moccasins down here on the dock?" He said, "The what?" He said, "Water moccasins, no." Yep, he said, "I know water moccasins, you have water moccasins down here." Yeah, now
Yikes.
that's not a good thing, I wouldn't think.
No.
I mean, only
Maybe not
because,
gonna
not
affect
because they're
survival.
poisonous and they're very dangerous, but, I mean,
Yeah, the
that's
migration
not a
is rough.
natural,
Yep.
And then there are the pelicans.
Yeah,
that's true too.
pelicans well, they were just flying through, but they were at the north channel.
Harborside,
of
they're,
Wolf Lake.
they're at Harborside also, Lake
Are they?
Calumet.
Wow.
Are they staying?
I don't know, you have to talk to Walter about that.
Huh.
The
But
one,
he identified them, and everyone went,
There were about a half a dozen or something, weren't there at the time?
yeah, we had about, I don't know, a good dozen. And they were, and I couldn't believe the call. Somebody called me. And so I went out there, and there, it was at 8 in the morning or 8:30, I just got, and I drove out there, and they were all huddled next to one of the islands. And, but they were there, and I had my cell phone. I did take a picture of it. Smart enough.
I think we have some, did you get video when you went through there with them on it, or did
well,
Walter?
you know, they were sort of way out, and I was.
But you got it just the same, I think.
Swooping around trying to find it. He said, it's there, and I sort of
But
tried,
they
I did
were-
the best I could. They weren't close to the shore, though. But that was at Lake
I
Calumet.
went back at noon, and they were fishing the channel at
The
noon.
Pelicans were.
Yeah, and then, and I could see them, and they fished it, you know, it's like a bald eagle would fish it, just fine. And then I returned, somebody else went there at 4, I couldn't find them.
Huh.
But so they probably spent half a day there.
Well, you know, we were talking a little bit about climate and habitat, and the National Audubon Society completed some research just this year from 40 years of data being collected by citizen scientists across the U.S. And they have some really brilliant and scary forecasts about migratory patterns and the range of, I think, 250 species. So if you're interested in that, you should go online. Probably can Google National Audubon Society Climate, and it will come up. I think you guys are hosting something. I think there's the
Next
climate
Thursday.
scientist Gary,
Langham.
yeah, is coming. He's going to spend the whole week giving different presentations on what the research shows.
So it'll be at our place at noon on Thursday, next week from this,
Yeah.
on the 12th.
So, I mean,
It's
that's
open to the
information
public.
you need to say, okay, well, like, for instance, the conversation we've been having with Doug Stotts from the Field Museum is, it may say that this habitat doesn't work anymore, but if they move forward, if they move north, there won't be the structure there. So it's actually important for us to keep some of it here, and they may choose to stay because of the opportunities, the habitat structure that's needed. So it's really, really fascinating data that we're hoping to use.
Mike, I think that, well, I'm here, but to hear Suzanne, and also because I missed the previous 9. And I, like my early New Year's resolution was to be a better attendee. But the history of natural history in this area would be a fabulous thing to take up at some point, if you're looking for other speakers. Doug's great. The other person who sprang to mind is a colleague of mine named Alan Resitar, who's a herpetologist and grew up in Hammond.
Yeah. No, I've had him
Yeah.
before for festivals, and Alan, you know, this is a great story about him. 2 weeks after we had the biodiversity blitz, he was paddling on the Indiana side of Wolf Lake, and he found cricket frog.
Yep.
Nobody knew that it was there.
What?
2 weeks.
Cricket frog.
Cricket frog. It,
You're mumbling,
You have to
Michael.
know what a
I'm
cricket
sorry.
that is.
It must be important.
It's a size of a cricket. I think that's why they
Okay,
call
all
it.
right, I just couldn't hear you.
Okay, I'm sorry. And a cricket frog. And
Okay.
I had, but anyway, it was interesting because it ties in with and no one discovered it there. But
And he's just has one of those unbelievably detailed, experientially based appreciations for the landscape, right? And a real, I mean, he's a real student of history as well, and is an engaging speaker. He'd be a lot of fun, and can speak to talk about other iconic species like Mississauga trails.
And I run into Doug every once in a while at Wolf Lake. He's out there.
Oh, yeah.
I see Walter much more than I see Doug, but I've run into Doug a couple times.
The Walter said the pelicans are not that unusual here now. It surprised everybody.
Sounds like climate change.
Yeah.
But that's good. Doug would be good, and,
Doug's a terrific speaker.
Yeah.
and Alan.
And Alan's great.
So, in fact, I've already have a speaker scheduled for next year. You know,
Oh, good.
yes, because, it was because we had Paul Petraeus
Yeah.
last month talk about, and then I ran into Sue Bennett, and she said, you know, and I said, Paul suggested this last spring, so it was before they were really set up there, so, and I didn't, at that time, I didn't know that Sue Bennett was going to be in charge of it.
Fantastic.
But so I said, well, then you have to do it next year then for us. So I got
There you go.
for next year. And it's fun doing this because first of all, I didn't think I would get enough people here. And because the student population doesn't turn out. We had, I think, a single student in all of last year's thing.
Is there a class that meets at this time?
But Joanne, if you think back to when you were an undergraduate, how many of these things do you go to?
Yeah, that's not.
You
Well,
didn't get
that's
credit
really
for?
asking me to go quite far.
Yeah.
No, but I never would have. I mean, so and that was this was really for community folk.
But there has to be that folding in though. It has to,
Well,
has to
it would
happen.
be nice, but I don't know if they really have a strong history.
Well, what should happen is that the instructors should say, you have to go to this because there's some important information that's class related.
Well, what I do for festivals, and it doesn't help that much, is just to get teachers, suggest to teachers, you know, once you sign your students for extra credit, and have them
See.
And that works sometimes. I've had students come in, especially on the Underground Railroad, and say, yeah, I'm here, you know, and that's nice.
'Cause I got
But
it.
that doesn't always.
Yeah.
Right? So,
Is there a student music, is there a student newspaper, Michael?
there is, it's called The Shavings, but.
What kind of content is really strong in it for the students?
Well, I rarely read it, so.
Might be worth looking at to see if there's something there that would catch them here.
Yeah,
Or
Yeah.
ask the editor to send a reporter to these meetings.
yeah.
And then they
Mhm.
do an article and at least you get
Yeah.
That's
information out.
a good idea, definitely.
Mhm.
And they get credit for that.
Yeah. But there are ways of doing it, if I had more time.
There's always a possibility of generating an informal rumor that some of the environmental folks are former rock stars or something like that, and you never know when they're going to be in the audience or among the group. You know, so I don't know. So just possible.
Some of them may also think that, well, why should I come when I could just watch the video?
They only would.
Well, I'm hoping that has some effect.
I am
Yeah.
too. I'm hoping that it's not helpful. Right?
We never know.
You know.
We never know.
I'd rather
Thank you.
participate because frankly speaking, there's nothing on TV worth watching.
Ain't that the truth? Huh?
You mean the debates have?
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Well, we were talking a little bit about climate and habitat, and the National Audubon Society completed some research just this year from 40 years of data being collected by citizen scientists across the U.S. And they have some really brilliant and scary forecasts about migratory patterns and the range of, I think, 250 species. So if you're interested in that, you should go online, probably can Google National Audubon Society climate, and it will come up. I think you guys are hosting something. I think there's the
Next
climate
Thursday.
scientist Gary,
Langham,
yeah, is coming. He's gonna spend the whole week giving different presentations on what the research shows.
so he'll be at our place at noon on Thursday, the next week from Thursday,
Yep.
on the 12th.
Yep. So, I mean,
It's
that's
open to the
information
public.
you need to
If
say,
you're interested.
okay, well, like, for instance, the conversation we've been having with Doug Stotts from the Field Museum is, it may say that this habitat doesn't work anymore, but if they move forward, if they move north, there won't be the structure there, so it's actually important for us to keep some of it here, and they may choose to stay because of the opportunities, the habitat structure that's needed, so, it's really, really fascinating, data that we're hoping to use.
Mhm. Mike, I think that, well, I'm here to hear Suzanne, and also because I missed the previous 9 talks. And I, like, my early New Year's resolution was to be a better attendee. But the history of natural history in this area would be a fabulous thing to pick up at some point, if you're looking for other speakers. Doug's great. The other person who sprang to mind is a colleague of mine named Alan Resitar, who's a herpetologist and grew up in Hampton.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Take care. This happened at the last meeting, we stayed around
There's Paul Petray.
with Paul,
Yeah,
but,
Paul kept talking.
yeah,
Just kinda go.
well, we,